My 18th birthday had fireworks, string lights, and my sister's name on the tiered cake. When the MC toasted to Caroline turning 18 again, I understood this house had no room for me. I walked out barefoot, leaving the laughter behind, heading toward a city where I would build a $10 million life. They thought I would return, apologizing. I returned with a key to the penthouse. My name is Eliza Beaumont. Tonight the Charleston air was thick and heavy, a familiar August humidity that clung to your skin like a second unwanted layer. But it was not as suffocating as the cloud of expensive perfume and feigned pleasantries gathering in our garden. The garden itself was a lie tonight. It was transformed, draped in thousands of tiny warm yellow lights that looped from the branches of the ancient oaks, turning the manicured lawn into a theatrical stage. It looked beautiful and it felt like a betrayal. At the brick entrance to the garden, my parents stood as a united front, the perfect hosts. My mother, elegant in a deep blue silk dress, laughed a sound that was sharp and bright, but never quite reached her eyes, her hand resting lightly on the arm of each guest. My father, handsome and expansive in his linen suit, was a whirlwind of firm handshakes and booming. "Joe, happy you could make it, Isles." They were welcoming the tide of Charleston's elite to my birthday party, except it was not my birthday party. In the center of the garden, strategically placed by the tiered stone fountain, was the cake. It was a 3-tiered monstrosity of pristine white buttercream, a cascade of delicate hand-spun sugar magnolias tumbling down one side. It was exactly the kind of cake a girl turning 18 would dream of. And there, in swirling, opulent gold script, was the name Caroline Beaumont, my sister. "Eliza, you must smile. Be polite." My mother's voice was a low, urgent hiss, her manicured fingers digging into the soft flesh of my elbow. I hadn't realized I had stopped walking, my feet rooted to the grass. I had been staring at the cake, at the 2 words that were not my name. I tried to pull my lips into a shape that resembled a smile. It felt unnatural, like trying to bend cold metal. It felt like a grimace. I was the ghost at my own celebration. "Do not make a fuss in front of the guests," she added, her grip tightening. A silent, painful warning. "This is a very important night for your father." I tore my gaze from the cake and found him. He was standing near the glowing bar, deep in conversation with a man in a suit that looked offensively expensive, even for this crowd. The man laughed at something my father said, and I saw the glint of a lapel pin, a small stylized P&C, Palmetto Crest Holdings, my father's potential new business partners. Of course, this wasn't a party for me. This was a stage. This was a networking event, a financial play, and my birthday was just the convenient disposable theme. A young man in a starched white server's jacket, his face earnest and slightly nervous, approached me with a silver tray. He balanced 2 flutes of champagne. "Miss Caroline," he asked, his smile bright and automatic. "Happy birthday. Can I offer you a drink?" The glasses hovered in the air between us, shimmering under the yellow lights. He was looking at me, but seeing her, this was the first cut. Not deep, but sharp and precise. It was the paper cut that stings more than it should. I felt my throat tighten. I could not correct him. I could not find the words, "I am not her," or, "My name is Eliza." I simply gave a small, stiff shake of my head and watched him pivot. Undisturbed, offering the champagne to the next guest, he moved on, leaving me in his wake, a non-person, not even worthy of a corrected introduction. I was not Miss Caroline in that moment. I was not even Eliza. I was just a void in a pale blue dress. The saxophone player hired to add a touch of authentic Charleston class, as my mother had put it, finished a smooth, forgettable tune. A man in a sequined blazer, someone I'd never seen before, stepped up to a small portable microphone. He tapped it once, a sound that boomed artificially across the lawn. All right, everyone. If I could have your attention, please." His voice was slick, professional. The murmur of conversation died down. I want to take a moment to raise a glass to the real woman of the hour. My heart stupidly gave a small, hopeful leap. She is beauty. She is grace. She is our very own Charleston star. Let's give a huge round of applause for the birthday girl. A very happy 18th birthday for the second time to Caroline. The lawn erupted. Applause, laughter, and whistles cut through the humid air. 18th again, Caroline, someone shouted from the crowd. You don't look a day over 20. My sister, who was standing near the MC, positively glowed. She was 21 years old. She preened under the spotlight, blowing a kiss to the crowd, her laughter light and careless. This was my 18th birthday, the one that was supposed to matter, the one that marked the transition from child to adult, and they had with casual celebratory cruelty given it to her. My eyes fell on the small temporary wooden stage set up next to the fountain. It was draped in the same sheer gold-threaded fabric that I had spent 2 long hot afternoons helping the event planners hang. I had climbed a ladder, my fingers rubbed raw from the wire, my back aching. I had done it thinking I was decorating for my party. I had helped them angle the miniature spotlights, believing the warm golden glow was for me. Now those same lights were illuminating my sister, making her the centerpiece of an evening I had helped build. I had quite literally constructed the platform for my own erasure. The realization was a cold, hard stone sinking straight to the pit of my stomach. A sudden, unfamiliar surge of heat prickled my skin. It was rage, pure and sharp. This was not a mistake. This was not a simple, careless oversight. This was a message delivered publicly. This was a choice. I took a step forward. I pushed through a cluster of my father's associates, ignoring their annoyed glances. I did not know what I was going to do. Maybe I would grab the microphone from the sequined man. Maybe I would just stand on that stage and scream until they finally saw me. I just knew I had to shatter the illusion to break the spell. I had barely taken a second step before my mother's hand shot out, her fingers latching onto my wrist like a talon, her nails perfectly manicured, dug into my skin. Eliza, she whispered. Her voice was a razor blade hidden in velvet. Her smile, fixed for the guests, did not waver. Her eyes, however, were fixed on the stage, cold and hard. Do not embarrass everyone. It was not a request. It was an order delivered with the quiet, precise violence she had perfected over a lifetime. The meaning was unmistakable. Your pain, your humiliation, your very existence is secondary to our social standing. Defeated, the rage vanishing as quickly as it had come, replaced by a vast, cold emptiness. I allowed her to push me back. I stumbled, moving out of the main thoroughfare and into the shadows. 2 of Caroline's friends, girls I had known since we were 5, were standing nearby. They were both watching Caroline, who was now telling an animated story to the MC. One of them, her voice a sigh of pure, unadulterated admiration, whispered to the other, God, she just knows how to command a room. She steals the spotlight absolutely everywhere. The other girl giggled. She's a total icon. I wish I had her confidence. They were 2 feet away from me. They spoke as if I were not there. They did not see me. They did not lower their voices. It was as if I was a piece of the architecture, a breathing, silent part of the shrubbery they were standing next to. I could not breathe. The air was too thick, too sweet with the smell of gardenias and the metallic tang of lies. I backed away one careful step at a time until my shoulders hit the rough leafy wall of the hibiscus hedge that lined the edge of our property. The music swelled again. That same saxophone, now playing a smooth, generic cover of a pop song. It mixed with the hollow, brittle sound of forced laughter and the endless, cheerful clinking of glasses. It was the soundtrack to my own disappearance. I stood there hidden in the deep shadows of the leaves, and I watched them, my family, their friends, all these people gathered to celebrate a birthday that was not happening. For a girl who was, and me, the actual birthday girl, the one who had just turned 18, vanishing in plain sight. I turned my head just slightly and caught my own reflection in the dark, cool glass of the French doors that led to the formal dining room. The thousands of party lights turned the glass into a near-perfect, unflattering mirror. I saw a girl in a pale blue dress that they had picked out, a dress I hated, a girl with her dark hair curled and pinned in a way that made her look older, but not like herself. A girl who had spent the last hour being invisible, being told to smile, to be quiet, to not exist. I saw the girl who had spent her summer polishing the family silver, helping to plan the menu, and hanging the lights, all for someone else's party. I looked at the reflection, and for a terrifying second, I did not recognize myself. I pressed my lips together. The taste of the peach-flavored lip gloss they had insisted I wear was suddenly bitter, chemical. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered. The words were so quiet, so small. The humid night air probably dissolved them before they even left my mouth. And that was it. It was not a bolt of lightning. It was a simple, quiet click. The sound of tumblers falling into place inside a lock I did not even know I was trying to open. The anger was gone. The hurt was still there, a dull, familiar ache. But it was overshadowed by a sudden, total, and profound clarity. I was done. My movements were slow, almost dreamlike, but perfectly deliberate. I reached down and unstrapped the silver high-heeled sandals that were already pinching my toes. I held them in one hand, the metal buckles cool against my palm. The grass damp with evening dew was cool and real under my bare feet. I turned my back to the light and the music, and I walked. I did not run. I walked. My steps were steady. I walked past the white catering vans parked discreetly on the side gravel path. I walked past the soft golden glow of the party. I kept waiting for a voice, for a sound, for any acknowledgement of my departure. I waited to hear my mother's sharp hiss. "Eliza, where do you think you are going?" Or my father's distracted booming. "Eliza, come say hello." Nothing. No one called my name. No one noticed I was gone. I reached the tall wrought iron gate at the side of the garden, the one we rarely used. I lifted the heavy familiar latch. The metallic groan was loud in the sudden quiet. I stepped out onto the dark, cracked pavement of the sidewalk. I let the heavy gate swing shut behind me. The final definitive click of the latch echoed in the night. The music, the saxophone, the laughter, the entire glittering hollow lie. It was all instantly muffled, cut off as if by a switch. It was all swallowed by the thick Charleston night, by the rustle of the wind in the giant oak trees, and by the distant sound of traffic. I was outside. I was 18, and I was never ever going back. I walked. The sidewalk was gritty and uneven, the stones still damp from a brief evening shower. The smell of rain and car exhaust was a sharp, clean antidote to the thick, sweet poison of the gardenias back at the house. My bare feet ached, the gravel biting into my soles, but I did not stop. The silver high heels, the ones my mother had insisted matched the dress, were still clutched in my left hand, a ridiculous, useless weight. When I reached the end of the block, I swung my arm and threw them hard into the deep, dark tangle of a neighbor's overgrown azalea bush. They vanished without a sound. I did not go to the front door. I slipped through the shadows, down the side path to the mudroom. The door was, as always, unlocked. The house was loud. The bass from the music vibrating through the very walls, a steady, muffled pulse. No one heard me. I moved like a ghost up the back staircase, my feet silent on the runner. My room was my own. The only space in this house that was dark, a sanctuary from the thousands of yellow lights infecting the garden. I did not turn on the lamp. I stripped off the pale blue dress, leaving it in a heap on the floor, a soft, pathetic puddle of silk. I pulled on a pair of black jeans, a worn t-shirt, and my running shoes under my bed. My backpack was waiting. It was always half-packed, a secret what-if scenario I had never consciously admitted to. I unzipped it. Inside, I shoved my laptop in its charger. From my desk drawer, I pulled a plain white envelope. $720. My entire savings. 2 summers of working checkout at a suffocatingly quaint downtown bookstore. Every dollar folded and hidden. Money they did not know existed. I grabbed my largest sketchbook, the one bound in black, and a handful of pencils. I was out the window and down the old oak trellis I had climbed since I was a child. My feet hitting the soft grass in less than 3 minutes. I walked the 2 miles to the bus station on the edge of town. The station was a harsh fluorescent-lit box, smelling of stale coffee and disinfectant. The man behind the scratched plexiglass partition looked through me, his eyes dead. "One way," I said. My voice sounded strange. "Rusty. Where to?" I scanned the board of departures. The names blurred. Atlanta, Richmond. Then one stood out. Chicago. It sounded vast. It sounded cold. It sounded like the opposite of Charleston. Chicago, I said. I slid the crumpled bills under the glass. The ticket he slid back was thin and flimsy. An absurdly small piece of paper to represent such a colossal, life-altering decision. The bus was dark, smelling of diesel fumes and the faint chemical sweetness of the blue liquid in the onboard toilet. I found a seat by the window near the back and pressed my forehead against the cool, vibrating glass. I was just another shadow, another person running from something. As the bus pulled out of the station, merging onto the dark highway, I finally let myself breathe. I had not cried. I would not cry. Crying was what they expected. Crying was dramatic. I thought about the university applications I had spent months perfecting. The college fund, I assumed, was waiting for me. It all seemed like a joke now, part of the same elaborate stage play as the party. My parents had built a set for a perfect family, and I had just walked off stage. I would have to educate myself. I pulled out my laptop, balanced it on my knees. I did not have the money for a formal education. Not now. But the internet was vast. I tethered to my phone's fast-dwindling data just for a few minutes, finding the links I had saved weeks ago when I was just idly dreaming. Free courses, public lectures on staging and experiential design, the psychology of space, the theory of light. I would learn how to build worlds, real ones, not just the flimsy, pretty backdrops my family hid behind. I closed the laptop and looked out the window. The world was a black, rushing void, punctuated by the passing lonely lights of other cars. I took a pencil from my bag, but the sketchbook was too dark to see, so I used my finger. I traced on the fogged, cool glass of the window, the condensation capturing the lines. I drew a room. It was all glass on one side. It was filled not with party lights, but with the clean, white light of a new morning in the center. I drew a single, simple armchair, and I turned it to face the sunrise. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A single hard vibration. I did not need to look. I knew. I pulled it out anyway. The screen glowed painfully bright in the darkness. One message. My mother. You are being dramatic. Come back inside. You are embarrassing us. Not, are you safe? Not, where are you? You are embarrassing us. I read the words over and over. They had built an entire party to celebrate my sister on my birthday, and I was the one being dramatic. I was the embarrassment. A cold, hard certainty settled over me. I had done the right thing. I held down the power button on the side of the phone. I watched the screen flicker, and then I watched it die. I did not feel loss. I felt a click. I felt the last tether snap. I dropped the phone back into my bag. It was just plastic and glass now. I must have slept because I woke to a world of steel gray. The sun was not rising. The sky was just getting brighter. A cold metallic blue that seeped into the edges of the horizon. The bus was navigating a canyon of tall buildings. We pulled into the cavernous, echoing belly of Union Station. The moment I stepped off the bus, the city hit me. It was a physical assault. The air was colder, sharper. It smelled of burnt coffee and diesel, of the river, and of thousands of people all moving. The sound was immense. A constant roar, the screech of trains, the hiss of air brakes, a symphony of a world that did not care about me, and it was glorious. I stood in the center of the great hall, my small backpack, a pitiful defense against the scale of the place. People surged around me, a river of purpose, faces set, heels clicking on the marble. And not one of them, not a single one, knew who I was. No one knew my name. No one knew Caroline Beaumont. No one knew my father or his holdings or his reputation. I was invisible. But this time it was by my own design. This was not erasure. This was freedom. My $700 would not last. I found a hostel in Pilsen, a bunk bed in a room I shared with 3 other women who were also running in their own ways. I paid for 2 weeks in advance. My bed was the top bunk. The window next to it did not look out onto a manicured garden. It looked out onto a solid brick wall, not 5 feet away, stained with decades of grime and the ghosts of old painted advertisements. I could reach out and touch the rough, cold reality of it. It was the most beautiful view I had ever had. The next day, I walked until my feet were raw. I found a job at the North Branch Cafe, a small, perpetually busy place with steamed-up windows. Not a barista, not even a cashier. I was the dishwasher. My shift started at 4 inches the afternoon and ended at midnight. My world shrank to the small, hot stainless steel corner of the kitchen. I washed hundreds of glasses, heavy ceramic mugs, plates sticky with dried syrup. My hands were raw, chapped, and constantly smelled of sour milk and industrial detergent. It was the most honest work I had ever done. My life settled into a rhythm, the rhythm of survival. My nights were for the cafe, for earning the money that paid for my bunk and my instant noodles. My mornings were for my education. I would get home at 0 inches the morning, sleep for 4 hours, and be up at 5 before the city, before my roommates. I would sit in the cramped, cold, communal kitchen, my laptop plugged into the only working outlet, my headphones blocking out the world. I devoured the free online courses. I learned about the way light travels, how a warm light can make a room feel safe, and how a cold blue light can make it feel distant. I learned how the flow of a space, the path of least resistance, dictates how a person moves and feels within it. I was studying the art of making people feel something, of guiding their experience, of making them feel seen. In the afternoons, I would walk. Chicago was a library of discarded things. One evening, dragging my feet back from a long walk, I saw it leaning against a dumpster in an alley, an old 6-paned window frame. The wood splintered, the white paint cracked and peeling, someone else's trash. I hauled it back to the hostel. It was heavy. I hid it under my bunk. For a week, I spent my tips on sandpaper, wood glue, and a small can of dark walnut stain. I worked in the alley behind the hostel, in the fading light of the afternoon. I sanded away the old failed identity. I filled the cracks. I polished the wood until it glowed with a new deep warmth. I hung it on the brick wall opposite my bed. It was not a window. It was a shelf, a promise. One of my roommates, a girl with tired eyes and a kind smile, watched me hang it. "You made that?" she asked. "It was just garbage." "Everything has a second life," I said, running my hand over the smooth, finished wood. "It just needs someone to see it." I looked at the shelf, and then at the brick wall outside my real window. I remembered a promise I had made to myself when I was 15, after Caroline had accidentally destroyed a painting I had spent a month on, and my parents had told me to get over it. I had promised myself in the dark that one day I would build something solid, something true, something that no one ever could erase. I was still 18. I was washing dishes, but I had laid the first stone. My hands, once soft and useless, were now a roadmap of new calluses. The skin was perpetually raw, cracked from the industrial-strength detergent at the North Branch Cafe, the flesh under my fingernails permanently stained with the grime of other people's meals. I was a ghost in a different way now, a creature of steam and scraping haunting the hot, clattering back corner of a kitchen. But the last hour of my shift from 2 a.m. into 3 when the city was finally quiet and I was just cleaning. This hour was mine. I would prop my sketchbook, now filled with frantic lines, on the stainless steel counter above the sink, and I would design. I sketched on the back of order tickets, on greasy napkins, on anything that would hold a line. There was a customer, a woman, who came in almost every night, always around midnight, long after the kitchen had stopped serving food. She never ate. She just sat at the smallest, most ignored table in the back and drank black coffee. She had a severe, striking cloud of white silver hair, cut in a sharp, geometric bob. Her clothes were always black or gray, heavy architectural linens and wools that looked like they had been sculpted rather than sewn. She was ageless, and she had the most alert, unsettling eyes I had ever seen. She just watched the street, and sometimes she watched me. Tonight I was out of paper. I was scratching a design onto a thick disposable paper napkin using a piece of charcoal I had lifted from the tiny fireplace in the cafe's lounge area. I was trying to solve a problem. How to use a single light source to make a narrow, cramped hallway feel like a journey, not a trap. "You are forcing the shadow. You should be honoring it." The voice was low and rough, like stones rolling in a slow tide. I jumped, dropping the charcoal. It was her, the woman with the silver hair. She was standing right next to my dish pit, completely unfazed by the heat and the smell of sour rags. She gestured to the napkin with a long, elegant finger. "You are trying to erase the darkness, but the shadow is what gives the light its meaning. You are designing a space that lies." I stared at her, my heart hammering against my ribs. I'm just washing dishes, ma'am." "No," she said, her eyes not on me, but on the napkin, which she picked up, holding it delicately between her thumb and forefinger. "You are not. You are designing, and you are doing it like someone who has been invisible." Her gaze finally lifted, and it was intense, analytical, not unkind, but certainly not soft. "You design like a person who has spent a lifetime being ignored. That is why you see the details. You see the cracks. You see the texture in the brick wall everyone else walks past. You see the things people forget." I couldn't speak. I felt exposed, as if she had just read the last 6 months of my life from the lines on a dirty napkin. She reached into a large, structured black leather bag and pulled out a single heavy card. It was stark white, the text minimalist and black. "Sylvia Dunn, founder Dunn Spatial." "I have a studio in Fulton Market," she said, placing the card on the wet steel counter. "Be there Monday morning, 7 a.m. It is an internship, it is unpaid. You will have 2 weeks. If you are useful, you can stay. If you are not, I will not have to tell you to leave." She did not wait for a reply. She turned, her linen coat sweeping the air, and was gone. I quit my job the next morning. I had exactly enough money for 2 more weeks at the hostel. It was the most terrified and the most alive I had ever felt. Fulton Market was a world of contradictions, where gritty, century-old meatpacking plants stood next to gleaming glass towers. Sylvia's studio was on the 5th floor of a converted factory, a red brick behemoth that still smelled faintly of the animals it once processed. I stepped out of the clattering ancient freight elevator into the single most beautiful room I had ever seen. It was vast 30-feet-high ceilings with the original massive wooden beams still intact. The entire west wall was a grid of industrial windows, and the morning light was pouring in, thick and golden, illuminating millions of dancing dust motes. The air smelled of something I had never been able to name before. The clean, dry scent of sawdust and oak, the sharp tang of welding, and the earthy, cool smell of wet plaster. The walls were not painted. They were covered floor to ceiling in mood boards, not digital Pinterest boards, but real physical tactile boards, thousands of them. A piece of rusted corrugated tin next to a swatch of emerald green silk. A photograph of a shadow falling on a staircase next to a shard of blue sea glass. A cracked porcelain doll's hand. It was a library of textures, of memories, of light. Sylvia was in the center of the cavernous space, arguing with a man in a welding mask. She saw me standing there, clutching my backpack. "You are not late," she said, as if this was a minor miracle. "The sample library is a disaster. Organize it. If I find a single piece of slate filed under travertine, you are done." Those first 2 weeks were the most brutal, grueling education of my life. I was not an intern. I was a servant. I made coffee. I swept floors. I sorted thousands of pieces of wood, stone, metal, and fabric into a system I did not understand. But I watched and I listened. I learned the language of Dunn Spatial. It was a language I had been trying to speak my whole life without knowing the words. Light, Sylvia would bark at the 2 junior designers, is a language. It is the first thing a person reads. It tells them where to go. It tells them what is important. Stop illuminating a room and start sculpting the moment. Material, she would say, holding up a piece of salvaged barnwood, is memory. This plank has seen a 100 years of weather. It remembers the cold. It remembers the sun. Do not you dare try to cover that memory with paint. You amplify it. And pathway, she tapped a blueprint, is the breath. How does a person move from the door to the window? Is it a sudden, sharp gasp, or is it a slow, comfortable exhale? Right now, your design is suffocating me. My 2-week unpaid trial came and went. No one told me to leave, so I just kept showing up. I still lived at the hostel, but I spent my nights at the studio. Long after everyone else had gone home, I slept on a pile of canvas drop cloths in the storage room. They had slowly started letting me build the small-scale mock-ups. We were pitching for a small lobby, a tiny space, and the junior team had designed something safe. Pale woods, soft grays, recessed lighting. It was inoffensive. It was polite. It was everything I had left behind in Charleston. Sylvia stared at the foam core model for a full minute, her silence more terrifying than her anger. "It is safe," she finally said, her voice dripping with contempt. "And safety is invisibility. It is beige. It is forgettable. It is what people who are afraid of being seen produce. We are here to create experiences, not hiding places. We need guts." Her sharp blue eyes landed on me, standing in the corner. "Beaumont, you are quiet. Why do I hate this?" My blood ran cold. The other two designers, men in their late 22s, turned to stare at me. "Because," my voice was a dry croak, "because you are respecting the architecture too much. You are letting the boring rectangular room win." Sylvia's eyebrow twitched. "Explain." "The light," I said, gaining a sliver of confidence. "It comes from that one window at 4 p.m. The sun is going to hit this opposite wall." I pointed to the blank, sad space. "And this design does nothing with it. It ignores it. The path of the sunlight is the most interesting thing in the room, and you've put a beige chair in its way." I walked over to the model. "It needs to catch the light. It needs to hold it." Sylvia stared at me, then, "Fix it." I stayed at the studio for 2 days straight. I slept on the floor. I did not just fix the model. I destroyed it. I tore out the beige chair. I rebuilt the walls. I went into the scrap bin, a place I had spent weeks organizing. I found a pile of rusted, discarded copper pipes. I spent 6 hours polishing, cutting, and soldering them until I had created a new light fixture, something that looked less like a lamp and more like a constellation. I found a box of broken, shattered mirror fragments. I did not throw them away. I meticulously set them one by one into a plaster panel, creating a surface that did not reflect a perfect image, but rather captured the light and shattered it into 1,000 soft, shimmering patterns. When Sylvia came in on the third morning, I was asleep on the concrete floor, my hands covered in plaster and glue. She stood over the new model. She watched the morning light hit the plaster and glass panel, watched the soft, watery reflections dance on the opposite wall. She reached out and touched the copper lamp I had resurrected from the trash. "You did not save this," she said, her voice quiet. "You gave it a new life." She looked at me, my face streaked with dirt. "You stopped being safe." A week later, we were in a meeting with a new important client, a hotel developer. I was in the back of the room, my job to hold the presentation boards and make sure the coffee was hot. The client was skeptical. He was looking at a concept board for the material palette. "This is very raw. That rusted steel, that salvaged wood. It is a risk." Sylvia, in her element, was about to reply, but the client cut her off. He pointed directly at a small, detailed sketch in the corner of the board. A sketch of a bench made from old railway ties and woven brass. "This," the client said, "this is what I am talking about. This is smart. Who came up with this?" My heart stopped. It was my sketch, an idea I had put on her desk in the middle of the night, expecting nothing. I looked at the floor, expecting Sylvia to absorb the compliment, to take the credit. It was her studio. That was the way the world worked. There was a long pause. "That," Sylvia said, her voice clear and strong, was Eliza. She saw the story in the discarded materials. She turned and she looked right at me across the long, expensive table. She gestured for me to step forward. "This is Eliza Beaumont. She is our designer." Our designer, not the intern, not the girl who washes the dishes, not Caroline, our designer. The client turned and nodded at me, a look of professional appraisal. He saw me. I felt the room tilt. I nodded back, a short, jerky movement. Praying I would not faint, I held my breath until the conversation moved on. As soon as I could, I excused myself, my hands shaking. I made it to the storage closet, the one that smelled like oak and plaster. I shut the door, leaned my back against the hard, cool wall, and I slid to the floor. And for the first time since I had left Charleston, I cried. It was not the cold, empty, desperate feeling of being erased. This was something else entirely. It was a hot, violent, overwhelming flood. It was the pain of a bone being set. It was the agony of feeling returning to a limb that had been numb for a lifetime. I was not crying because I was weak. I was crying because for the first time in my entire 18 years, I had been seen. After that, everything changed. I got my first paycheck. It was small, but it was enough to rent a tiny freezing room in Logan Square. Sylvia's next words to me were not of praise. They were a new test. She handed me a thin file. A developer is staging a model apartment. It is a small unit. The value is low. The budget is almost nothing. No one else wants it. It is yours. I looked at the file. The budget was, as she said, practically zero. I was being set up to fail, or I was being given the only chance that mattered. This isn't a budget for furniture, I said. No, Sylvia replied. It is a budget for guts. I took the file. I did not go to furniture stores. I went to the scrapyards. I went to the alleys. I dragged a set of 4 discarded rotted wooden doors back to the studio and spent a week stripping, sanding, and refinishing them. I made one a dining table. I made another a headboard. I built a story. I did not stage a perfect sterile home. I staged a life. I staged a narrative I called from scrap to warmth. The developers, a husband and wife team, walked through the finished apartment. They touched the door table. They looked at the lamp I had made from a bundle of copper wire and old bottles. They said nothing. They left. I went back to the studio, my stomach in knots. Sylvia walked in at 5 p.m. She dropped a signed contract on my desk. They are not just taking the staging, she said, her voice flat. They have commissioned you to replicate the concept for all 20 units in the building. I stared at the paper. I could not breathe. Sylvia looked at me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something close to a smile. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. Good, she said, turning to walk away. The next one is harder. The success of the 20-unit project was a key, but I did not know what door it opened yet. Sylvia gave me a curt nod, which was her version of a parade and access to the studio's full workshop. But the commissions were not pouring in. That one project was a victory, but it was not a career. Not yet. Sylvia's studio, Done Spatial, operated in a high-stakes, high-budget world that I was not yet equipped for. I was a curiosity, her pet project. I needed something of my own, a space to prove the concept was not a fluke. My new roommate in Logan Square, Mia, was a film student with permanently tired eyes and a camera that was held together with gaffer tape. She watched me one night as I sat on our linoleum kitchen floor, sketching plans to turn a stack of discarded shipping pallets into a modular bookshelf. "What are you going to do with that when it's done?" she asked, drinking coffee straight from the pot at 2 inches the morning. "I don't know," I admitted, my pencil not stopping. "Build it first. Find a home for it later." "You should be filming this," she said, tapping her temple. "The before and after is a drug. People are addicted to transformation." The next day, I took the last of my paycheck from the staging project and created an account. I called it Second Light Studio. It felt right. It was what I was doing, what I was searching for. I posted a single grainy photo of the first shelf I had made back at the hostel. The one from the old window frame. The caption was simple: "Everything deserves a second life." It got 3 likes. One was from Mia. But I kept going. I started documenting my process. I was still working at Sylvia's during the day, learning the high-end language of luxury spatial design. But my nights and my weekends became a frantic, obsessive blur of Second Light. I would haunt the alleys and demolition sites of the city. My hands, which had finally healed from the cafe, now perpetually covered in splinters, paint, and metal dust. I documented everything. A photo of a pile of rusted, forgotten pipes. The next photo, those same pipes polished to a coppery shine, reborn as a geometric chandelier, a pile of torn, discarded books. The next, their pages folded and woven into a complex, sculptural wall hanging. Then came the door. I found it in an alley in the West Loop, a massive solid oak warehouse door, at least 10 feet tall, marked for the landfill. It was impossibly heavy. Its iron hardware rusted solid. It took me 2 nights and a borrowed dolly to move it piece by piece back to the tiny communal workshop in my apartment building's basement. "You have to film this," Mia insisted. She was energized by the sheer stupid audacity of it. "This is insane, Eliza. This is content." I bought a used digital camera for $50 at a pawn shop. It was old, but the lens was clean. Mia, in exchange for a steady, unending supply of the strongest coffee I could brew, became my cinematographer. We filmed the process, not just the pretty parts, but the sweat. Me in a respirator mask, sanding for hours, a cloud of ancient dust filling the room, me grunting as I tried to lift the solid beams, me burning my hand with a soldering iron. Mia cut it down. She was a brutal, brilliant editor. She compressed 3 weeks of agonizing labor into a single kinetic 15-second video. The video opened with a shot of the door, broken and tragic in the alley. Then, a rapid-fire thwack, thwack, thwack of cuts, a saw blade screaming, wood chips flying, my hands stained, dark, the bright blue-white spark of a welder. The final shot, a long, elegant 12-person dining table. The original iron hinges, once rusted, were now polished and reset as structural art. It was not just a table, it was a monument. It was a story. The caption, "I found a warehouse door in an alley. I made it a dining table." I posted it at 6:00 inches the morning on a Tuesday and went to work at Sylvia's. By the time I took my lunch break at 1 p.m, my phone had frozen, crashed, and died. I had to plug it into the wall just to reboot it. The video had 100,000 views. By the time I got home from the studio at 9 p.m, it had passed 1 million. By the next morning, it was at 2 million. My phone was not a phone anymore. It was a shrieking, vibrating siren of notifications. The comments were a tidal wave. "This is witchcraft." I cried over a table. "How much?" And then the email started. They did not just go to the new, barely functional email address I had set up for Second Light. They went to Dun Spatial. They found my personal email, the one I had not used since I left Charleston. It was a flood. They were not just from individuals. They were from real estate agents. "I have an estate I need to clear and stage in 48 hours. Can you do this?" They were from brands. "We are launching a new line of sustainable sneakers and we need a pop-up shop. Your vibe is exactly what we are looking for." They were from people I had never imagined. "I am a photographer. I do not have a budget, but I will trade you headshots for a set design." Sylvia called me into her office. She was sitting at her massive concrete desk, my phone on the table between us. It was vibrating, buzzing across the smooth gray surface like a dying insect. "You have," she said, her voice perfectly flat, "become a distraction." My blood ran cold. "Sylvia, I am so sorry. I did not mean for this to happen. I can take it down." "Do not be an idiot," she snapped. "And do not apologize. You have accidentally created leverage. The question is what you are going to do with it." She pointed at the phone. "This is a brush fire. It will burn out by next week, but the heat it generated is real. You have an audience. You have a brand. What you do not have is infrastructure." She leaned forward. "This studio," she gestured to the sprawling, sunlit space, "was built on one good idea and 20 years of brutal, thankless work. You got the good idea part done. The work is just beginning." My life, which had already been a frantic sprint, accelerated into an uncontrolled, terrifying, exhilarating free fall. My schedule became a joke. I was a machine built to process chaos. In a single 4-week period, I designed and executed 8 different projects under the Second Light name. I staged a sprawling, haunted-looking Victorian in Lincoln Park for an estate sale, using the deceased owner's own forgotten belongings, turning his dusty, neglected collections into curated, beautiful vignettes. I built a pop-up shop for the sneaker brand inside a raw, empty shipping container using only recycled cardboard and salvaged stadium seating. I designed 3 different sets for 3 different, desperate, brilliant, unpaid art school film projects. I was not sleeping. I kept my room in Logan Square, but I rarely saw it. I was living at Sylvia's studio, which was by a silent, unspoken agreement, now also my workshop. I slept on the floor on the same pile of canvas drop cloths I had used when I was an intern. I lived on cold coffee and the adrenaline of the next deadline. I was exhausted. I was bone-tired. I was happier than I had ever been in my entire life. The momentum was building on itself. One of the prop tech real estate companies, a startup that was trying to gamify the apartment hunting process, reached out. They did not just want staging, they wanted a concept. "We love your dining table from a door story," the CEO said, a man who spoke in exclamation points. "We want that for everything. We want our listings to tell stories." I pitched them an idea. It was simple. It was the core of what I was already doing. "You do not just show them the apartment," I explained, my voice raw from lack of sleep. "You tell them its history. We use reclaimed materials for the staging and every single piece. The floorboards, the kitchen counter, the light fixtures will have a small, elegant QR code. The code does not link to a store. It links to the story. This countertop was made from the slate roof of a demolished, church in Pilsen. This floor was salvaged from a high school gymnasium. You are not just selling square footage. You are selling a narrative." They signed the contract on the spot. 2 days later, an indie music label emailed me. "We are launching an album for a new artist. The album is called Echo Chamber. We need the launch party to feel like a memory, like something you can barely remember, but it haunts you. We need it to feel like one of your videos." I took the job. I filled a raw, empty gallery space with 25 antique mirrors, all of them sourced from junk shops, their glass fogged and silvering. I hung them at odd, conflicting angles. I did not light the room. I lit the mirrors. I bounced single narrow beams of warm light from one to the next, so the only illumination in the room was reflected, softened, and broken. The attendees walked through a space that felt like a dream, their own reflections catching and vanishing in the fogged glass. It was a space that felt, as the artist had whispered to me, like my own heart. The week after, a small independent newspaper, City Frame, the kind that everyone in the art and design world actually read, ran a piece. It was not a big feature. It was a small quarter-page column in the emerging section. There was a grainy photo of me covered in sawdust in front of the warehouse door. The headline read, "The Girl Who Gives Old Things a Second Life." It did not mention Charleston. It did not mention Caroline or my father or Palmetto Crest Holdings. It mentioned my work. It mentioned my ideas. It called me a rising voice in ethical design. It called me Eliza Beaumont. That article changed my relationship with Sylvia's studio. I was no longer an intern. I was no longer just a designer. I was, as she had put it, a distraction, a valuable one. "You are making too much noise," Sylvia told me, handing me a cup of coffee. "You cannot do this kind of work here. My clients are paying for bespoke silence. You are loud. You are sawdust and welding sparks. You need your own space." It felt like I was being fired. "So, I found you one," she said, dropping a set of keys on my desk. "It is in the West Loop. It is a 70-square-meter disaster. The rent is criminal. The lease is in your name. Do not mess it up." It was a 70-square-meter, 750-square-fawn, old garage, a concrete box with one wall of windows that were painted over, but it was mine. I spent my entire QR code project fee on the deposit and the first month's rent. Mia and I spent a weekend scraping the paint off the windows, letting the light in for the first time in what looked like decades. I did not have money for a fancy sign. I bought a sheet of steel from a scrapyard, painstakingly cut the letters out with a grinder, and let it rust for a week on the roof. Then I hung it above the door. Beaumont Atelier. The first thing I did in my new space was pay off my old debts. I sent the last of what I owed to the hostel in Pilsen. I paid Mia in real money for her camera work. And then I took myself to a flea market. I spent an hour walking, just breathing, not looking for materials, not hunting for a project. I found an old, faded photograph. It was a simple black and white snapshot from the 1,950 seconds of a woman I did not know, sitting alone on a beach, smiling at something outside the frame. She looked peaceful. She looked like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. I bought it for $2. I hung it on the wall of my new studio, the only thing on the vast, clean, white-painted brick. It was a promise a reminder of what I was building toward a moment of peace earned and paid for. That night, I was working late, as I always did. The West Loop was quiet at 3:00 the morning. I was sketching, trying to solve a new design problem. The smell of fresh-cut wood and metal filling my studio. And for a second I heard it. That smooth, hollow saxophone from that night in Charleston. That generic, forgettable tune. I froze, my pencil hovering over the paper. The sound was so clear. It was as if the musician was in the room. But it was not real. It was a memory. The sound of my old life. The sound of my own erasure echoing in the quiet of my new one. I used to hear it in my nightmares. I used to wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, convinced I was still in that garden, invisible. But now I just listened. I let the ghost notes hang in the air. I took a sip of my cold coffee, and I kept working. The saxophone did not stop. It just faded. It was not a nightmare anymore. It was just background music. The next morning, I opened my laptop and typed out a new mission statement for my website. It was simple. It was the truth. Second light, I wrote. A second light for spaces and for people. I hit publish. My new life was just beginning. The City Frame article was small, but it was not quiet. In the digital world, there is no such thing as a local story. It was shared. It was screenshotted. It was reposted, and inevitably, like a slow-moving toxic tide, it washed up on the shores of Charleston. My phone, which had become a tool for work and a source of constant positive notifications, buzzed with a number I had not seen in almost a year, a number I had not blocked, but had simply muted. My mother. It was not a phone call. It was, of course, a text message. A friend sent us an article about your little workshop. We are so very proud of you. Your father and I were just saying how Caroline's creativity must have finally rubbed off on you. She is signing a major brand deal for her new lifestyle line. I read the text 10 times. My new 70-meter studio, built from scrap, and adrenaline felt suddenly intensely cold. Her creativity must have finally rubbed off on you. Even now, even from 500 miles away, from a life I had built entirely on my own, they found a way to make me a footnote in her story. I was not a person. I was a reflection of Caroline. A cold, hard anger, a kind I had not felt since the night of the party, settled in my stomach. But this was different. This was not the hot, desperate rage of a victim. This was the cold, clarifying focus of an adult. I did not reply. Instead, I did something I had put off for a year. I had left my laptop behind in Charleston, but I had backed up my entire life to a cloud drive. My photos, my school papers, and I hoped, my financial documents. I had not looked at it since I left. I sat down at my desk, the one I had made from a salvaged fire door, and I logged in. I was looking for my university acceptance letters, a digital copy of the future I had almost had. I found the folder, and in it I found a subfolder labeled College Fund. My father, a man obsessed with appearances, had set up a formal trust fund for my education when I was born. He loved to talk about it at dinner parties. My girls will have the best no matter what. The folder contained the digital login credentials for the bank's trust portal. I had not looked at it in years. I had just assumed the money was there, a safe, quiet promise. My hands were shaking. I typed in the username. I typed in the password. I clicked login. The page loaded. My name, Eliza Beaumont, was at the top. And then the balance. Total assets, $412.18. I stared at the number. It was not a mistake, it was a sentence. I clicked on the activity tab. The fund had not been bled dry over time. It had been, in military terms, decapitated. There was one single transaction, a wire transfer. The date was 3 weeks before my 18th birthday, 3 weeks before the party. My breath hitched. They had drained my future before I had even walked out the door. The party had not been the cause of my leaving. It was just a celebration of my obsolescence. They had already decided I was not worth the investment. The amount was staggering, all of it gone, and the recipient, the account name it was wired to, Caroline Creatives LLC, my sister's company, her influencer brand, her lifestyle line that my mother was so proud of. It was not an investment in Caroline. It was theft. They had stolen my education, my future, and used it to fund hers. They had taken my light and handed it to her to make sure she shined brighter. I felt a wave of nausea so profound I had to grip the edge of my desk. I was not just the forgotten daughter. I was the family's secret, unwilling financier. I did not call them. What would I have said? "You stole my money." They would have said I was being dramatic. They would have said I was embarrassing them. Instead, I called Sylvia. I was in her office an hour later. I did not cry. I laid out the facts, my voice as cold and flat as the concrete desk between us. I showed her the printout of the bank transfer. She listened, her face an impassive mask. She did not offer sympathy. She offered something far more valuable. "This is not a family squabble, Eliza," she said, her voice a low growl. "This is a significant felony-level financial crime. You were a minor when the trust was established. This is a breach of fiduciary duty. This is theft, and you are going to handle it like a professional." She picked up her phone. She did not dial. She looked at a number on a physical, leather-bound notebook. "There is a small, very quiet, very powerful group of lawyers," she said. "The Clinic of Arts and Business. They do pro bono work for artists who are being screwed. And I assure you, you are being screwed." She made the call. "I am sending someone over. Her name is Beaumont. Yes, she is one of mine. Give her your best." My lawyer was a woman named Priya Singh. She was the opposite of Sylvia. She was soft-spoken, warm, and wore a bright yellow cardigan. And within 5 minutes of meeting me, I was more terrified of her than I had been of anyone in my life. She was a smiling, polite shark. "They did what?" she asked, her smile not wavering as she read the bank statement. Her eyes, however, were like chips of ice. She listened to my entire story. The party, the text messages, my father's business, Palmetto Crest Holdings. "Okay," she said, tapping the printout. "First, we do nothing. Not publicly. Nothing." I was incredulous. "They stole from me." "Yes," Priya said, her voice soothing. "And they are sloppy. They are arrogant. Arrogant people believe they have covered their tracks. But they have just left bigger, clumsier footprints. We are not going to sue. Not yet. A lawsuit makes noise. Noise gives them time to hide, to shred, to rewrite the narrative. And your family," she said, "is all about narrative. What do we do?" "You," she said, "go back to work. You keep building your brand. You become so successful, so visible, that when this does come out, you are not the disgruntled runaway daughter. You are Eliza Beaumont, founder of Beaumont Atelier, a respected designer. You build your own credibility so high they cannot possibly climb over it to smear you. And in the meantime, I will silently, gently begin to gather evidence. We subpoena the bank records. We get the incorporation papers for Caroline Creatives LLC. We find out who authorized that transfer, and we find out if your father had the legal right to do so. And I suspect," she smiled, "he did not." She told me not to contact them, not to reply to their texts, to build a wall of silence. "Let them wonder what you are doing," she said. "Let them get nervous." I left her office feeling like I had a bomb strapped to my chest. I went back to my studio. I went back to work. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. It was not addressed to Beaumont Atelier. It was addressed by hand to Eliza Beaumont. It was on thick, expensive, cream-colored cardstock. There was no return address. I opened it. The letter inside was a single sheet folded once. The postmark in the top right corner was not from Charleston. It was from Chicago. The letter was not handwritten. It was typed. "We understand you are making a new life for yourself. That is admirable. But digging up the past is messy. It would be a shame for your new partners, your new atelier, to find out you are the kind of person who smears her own family for attention. Families have disagreements. Smart girls handle them privately. A girl as smart as you with such a new fragile business should understand that. Stop digging." I read it 3 times. It was a threat, a polite corporate veiled threat, but it was a threat. I looked at the postmark again. It was a standard Chicago processing stamp, but there was a faint blue secondary mark from the meter. It had been run through a corporate mail meter number. I Googled it. The mail meter was registered to the Chicago satellite office of Palmetto Crest Holdings, my father's new business partners. They had not just stolen my money. They were now actively, threateningly, trying to silence me. This was not a family dispute. This was a conspiracy. That night it was raining. A cold, miserable Chicago rain that turned the streets into black mirrors. I was in my studio. I could not work. I could not sketch. My hands were shaking too hard. So, I did what I knew how to do. I made a mood board, but this was not about materials. I took a huge empty sheet of black foam core, the kind I used for client presentations, and I pinned it to my wall. In the center, I pinned the letter from Palmetto Crest. To the left, I pinned the printout of the bank transfer. To the right, I pinned my mother's text message. I took a white china marker and I started to draw arrows. I drew an arrow from Caroline Creatives LLC to my mother's text, "We are so proud." I drew an arrow from the bank transfer to my father. I drew an arrow from my father to Palmetto Crest Holdings. And then I drew a gay, angry circle around the "stop digging" in the letter, and drew an arrow right back to Palmetto Crest. It was a web money power image. And then I finally understood. I looked at the board at the constellation of my family's betrayal, and I realized Priya was right. They were not scared of me. They were not scared of a lawsuit. They could make a lawsuit go away. They were scared of the story. They were scared of the City Frame article, but with a new headline. Daughter of prominent Charleston businessman, partner at Palmetto Crest, accuses family of theft. They were not scared of losing the money. They were scared of losing their reputation. Their entire world was built on the image of the perfect, successful, philanthropic family. My story, the real one, was a wrecking ball. And the threatening letter, that was not my father. He was a bully, but a lazy one. This was his partners. This was corporate risk management. I was not a daughter. I was a loose end, a liability. A cold, hard, calm settled over me. I stopped shaking. "Okay," I whispered to the empty rain-lashed studio. "You want an image? You want a narrative? I will build one. I would not just be the girl who gives old things a second life. I would be the woman who built a life so strong, so bright, so undeniable that their shadows could not touch it. I would wait. I would let Priya gather the proof, and I would keep building my fortress. Brick by brick, I would let the light, my second light, reveal the truth at the exact perfect moment. I went back to my sketchbook, I turned the page, and I started to design my future. I had been saving every dollar I made. I was still living like a ghost, pouring every cent back into the atelier. I had a file on my laptop, a secret dream. It was a listing, a raw attic space in River North. It was not a penthouse. It was a disaster, a 90-year-old, undeveloped, raw to the studs gabled roof with pigeons and leaks. But the view was the entire Chicago skyline. It was the future. It was for sale. But there was a catch. The building's co-op board was famously difficult. They were only selling the raw space to a buyer who would also win the contract to redesign the building's main lobby and rooftop terrace. It was a package deal. They wanted a statement. They wanted a designer who would elevate the building's entire brand. I looked at my investigation board. I looked at the threatening letter, and I looked at the listing for the raw, broken, beautiful space in the sky. I would not just get the money back. I would not just get justice. I would get everything. I put a down payment on the attic space, a huge, terrifying, non-refundable deposit. It was a bet on myself. The conditions were clear. I had 6 months. I had to enter the design competition. I had to win the contract. If I won, I would get the rights to buy and build the penthouse of my dreams. If I lost, I would lose my deposit and my one chance to build a fortress in the sky. "Okay," I said again, my voice stronger now. "Let's go to war." The bomb was armed. Priya, my lawyer, was quietly gathering the components: bank records, incorporation papers, a quiet investigation into Palmetto Crest's partners. My family's betrayal, their theft, was now a silent, ticking clock, waiting for my signal. But Priya's advice echoed in my studio every single day. Do not move until you are bulletproof. Build your fortress so high they cannot even see the top. The fortress. That was the work. And my work had to get louder. I had the key to my own studio, Beaumont Atelier. I had a growing list of clients who wanted my second light aesthetic. But the penthouse, the raw, leaking, pigeon-filled space in the sky at Lakeshore Crown, was the goal. Winning the contract to redesign that building's lobby was the only way to secure it. I had 6 months. I needed more than a portfolio of staged apartments. I needed a masterpiece. I decided to stop just staging spaces. I needed to create an experience. I went to Sylvia. I need a gallery, I said. A small one. For a month. She looked at me over her glasses. You are not an artist, Beaumont. You are a designer. Artists starve. Then I will be a designer who builds an exhibit, I countered. I have a concept. Good, she said, pulling a key from her desk. There is a vacant storefront on the ground floor of this building. The lease is out. You have 3 weeks. Do not make a mess. I called it Rooms That Remember. I did not just use salvaged materials. I curated their ghosts. I went to a demolition site of a church that had been damaged in a fire and convinced the foreman to let me haul away a single charred pew. I spent 2 weeks sanding it, stabilizing the wood, leaving just enough of the scorch marks to honor its history. It was not a bench. It was a statement on survival. I collected hundreds of broken, discarded bottles, blue, green, and brown, from the banks of the Chicago River. I tumbled them, softening their edges, and built a massive, intricate light fixture that cast a watery, mosaic-like glow. It was a chandelier of forgotten nights. I took a dozen old cracked doors, stripped them of their hardware, and hung them as a floating labyrinthine wall. Each one was a different color, a different memory of a threshold. It was the full realization of my QR code idea, but evolved. This was not just text on a screen. I had Mia help me. We recorded audio files. When a visitor scanned the code on the church pew, they did not read salvaged wood. They heard a 30-second audio clip, the sound of a single resonant organ note followed by a quiet, clear voice. This wood held a congregation for 78 years. It survived a fire. It is still here. It is still strong enough to hold you. When they scanned the river bottle chandelier, they heard the sound of flowing water and a soft whisper. Everything broken can be gathered. Everything gathered can be made to catch the light. It was not just an exhibit. It was a performance. It was a cathedral of second chances. I documented the entire process, and then I took the portfolio, the audio files, the narrative, and I sent it to the Midwest Spatial Awards. I did not enter the residential design category. I did not enter commercial staging. I entered Best Experiential Space. It is a risk, Sylvia said, standing in the middle of the finished exhibit. The light from the river bottles was casting a soft blue-green pattern on her face. Being safe is being invisible, I said, repeating her own words back to her. She almost smiled. You are learning. This is not terrible. She touched the scorched wood of the pew. But the Midwest Awards are for established firms. They are for million-dollar budgets. This is just guts. They may not understand it. They will, I said. She looked at me, her eyes sharp, analytical. And if you win, Eliza, what do you do with the trophy? The question hung in the air. It was not about the award. It was about the why. I am going to buy the sky for myself, I said. Sylvia nodded. Once. Then you had better win. Mia had filmed the entire creation of the exhibit. The late nights, the welding, the grinding, the moments of frustration, and the final breathtaking reveal. She cut a new video. This one was not 15 seconds. It was 3 minutes long. She set it to a single haunting cello track. This video was not just about craft. It was about storytelling. It was about healing. It showed me covered in soot, gently sanding the charred pew. It showed me looking through a mountain of broken glass and finding the perfect unbroken bottleneck. The video was slow, poetic, and strangely intimate. It was not about flipping junk. It was about listening to it. We posted it on the Beaumont Atelier account. The dining table video had been a brush fire. This was an avalanche. The first video had made people say, "Wow." This one made people cry. The comments were different. "This is not design. This is therapy. I have been following you for a year, and I just realized your entire page is about healing. It is the craft, but it is the why. Thank you." The video was shared not by design blogs, but by lifestyle coaches, by therapists, by art collectives, by people who just needed a flicker of hope. 2 days later, an email landed in my inbox. "Dear Miss Beaumont, we are the curating team for TEDx Chicago. Your recent video, Rooms That Remember, has deeply moved us. We are struck by the way you use physical space to explore profound emotional narratives. We would be honored if you would consider giving a talk at our upcoming event." My stomach twisted. I read the next line. "We have a theme for the event: redesign. We believe your personal journey and your unique philosophy would be a perfect fit. We would like to propose a title for your consideration: Redesigning the Space Called Family." I felt the air leave my lungs. This was not a design pitch. This was not a client meeting. They were not asking for my work. They were asking for my wound. I printed the email and walked to Priya's office. She read it, and her usual warm smile faded. "Well," she said, "this complicates things." "I should say no," I said, my voice shaking. "I am a designer. I am not this. I cannot talk about this." "About what?" Priya asked, her eyes sharp. "About your family. About the theft. The lawsuit." "Yes." "Did they ask you to talk about that? Did they ask you to name names?" "No," I said. "They asked me to talk about redesigning the space called family." Priya leaned back. "Eliza, you have been doing that every single day for the past year. You did it when you got on the bus. You did it when you washed dishes. You did it when you built a table from a door. You have been redesigning the space called family by building a new, stronger structure called yourself. They are not asking for your trauma. They are asking for your expertise." She tapped the email. "You are bulletproof when you own the narrative. This is how you own it. You do not talk about them. You talk about you." I said yes. The announcement went out a week later. My name, Eliza Beaumont, founder of Beaumont Atelier. Next to the title, Redesigning the Space Called Family. It did not take 24 hours. The message came not to my phone, but in the most public way possible. Caroline. She had never not once commented on my work. She had never acknowledged my existence in Chicago. But now she posted a new story on her Instagram account, the one my stolen education fund had paid for. It was a filtered selfie video of her laughing in a new convertible, her hair blowing perfectly. The text was laid over the top. "It is so tacky when people sell their little family tragedies to buy themselves a spotlight. Some of us just work hard. Others need a pity party to get a chandelier." Mia saw it first. "That bitch," she said, her voice a low growl. "I know," I said. I was looking at the post, chandeliers. It was so petty, so specific. It was almost laughable. She was watching me. She was threatened. "I am going to destroy her," Mia said, her fingers flying over her keyboard. "No," I said, putting my hand on her arm. "You are not. You are going to do nothing." I looked at Caroline's post at the sneering, perfect face. She is still fighting with shadows. She is still trying to erase me. She is trying to pull me back into the garden. I am not playing. "Eliza, the comments on the TEDx post are going to be a war zone." "Then you will lock them," I said. "We do not engage. We do not respond. We are not available for that conversation. We are busy building." Mia locked the comments on every single one of my social media platforms. The silence was its own reply. I wrote my talk. It was the hardest thing I had ever built. I did not mention Charleston. I did not mention Caroline or my father or my mother. I did not mention the theft. I told a story about a girl who loved to build things. I told a story about a house where the lights were bright, but they only shone on one person. I talked about what it means to be invisible. And then I talked about building. I talked about the day I realized that my worth was not determined by someone else's spotlight. I stood on that bright red circular carpet under a light so hot it felt like a sun. I looked out at the dark, silhouetted faces, and I delivered the final line. My voice clear and strong, not a single tremor. We are all told our entire lives to wait for an invitation, to wait to be picked, to be seen, to be given a seat at the table. I am here to tell you to stop waiting. I am here to tell you that you do not need an invitation to build your very own table, and you can build it out of whatever you want. The applause was a physical wave that hit me. It was not polite, it was a roar. The talk went live a week later. It did not just go viral, it became a manifesto. That one line, "You do not need an invitation to build your own table," was everywhere. It was on coffee mugs, it was on t-shirts, it was the caption for 1,000 new businesses. Beaumont Atelier was no longer just a design studio, it was a movement. My email inbox exploded. The staging orders were overwhelming, but they were different now. People did not just want my look, they wanted my philosophy. A boutique hotel chain, the Alchemist Hotels called. "We are rebranding our entire chain of 14 properties," the CEO said. "We do not want a new design. We want a new soul. We want your soul. We want the rooms that remember concept for all our lobbies." It was a multi-million-dollar contract. I hired my first 2 employees. I was sitting at my desk trying to process the hotel contract when the phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. "Miss Beaumont, this is Arthur Middleton from the Lakeshore Crown Development Board." My heart stopped. This was the penthouse. "I have to be honest." The voice was deep, formal. "Your initial application for the lobby redesign was unconventional. We had you at the bottom of our list, but I have a daughter at Northwestern. She sent me your TEDx talk this morning. I have never seen anything like it." I stayed silent. "The board has reviewed your file again. Your Rooms That Remember exhibit. Your work with the Alchemist Hotels. We were looking for a designer. It seems we have found a visionary instead." "Thank you, sir," I managed. "We are giving you the final pitching slot, Miss Beaumont, next Friday. You will be presenting against the 2 largest, most established firms in the city. Do not disappoint us." The line clicked. Dead. I hung up the phone. I had 1 week to design the pitch that would win me the sky. I went to my workshop. I cleared the tables. I pulled out my materials. Not wood, not metal, glass. I would build them the centerpiece for my pitch, a model of a massive suspended installation for the lobby. I would build them a cloud made of thousands of pieces of recycled, reclaimed glass. Each one hung on a filament, each one catching the light from the lake. A cloud of second chances, a cloud of light. I would not just show them a design. I would show them their future and mine. My TEDx talk did not just go live. It detonated. The line, "Invisibility has its own sound," became a shared, painful acknowledgement for people I had never met. The talk, my story, was translated into 12 different languages within a week. The quote about building your own table was not just a quote, it was a permission slip. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I was bracing. A spotlight that bright does not just illuminate, it also casts very long, very dark shadows. And my family, I knew, had been living in those shadows, watching. I remembered the night before the talk, the final technical rehearsal. It was just me and a lighting technician in a 3,000-seat empty auditorium. I stood on the red circle, the lights hot on my face, and I looked out at the sea of empty chairs. I saw them. I imagined my father in the front row, his arms crossed, checking his watch, calculating the cost of the event. I imagined my mother, her face, a mask of polite disinterest, texting her friends. And I imagined Caroline in the center, not watching me at all, but taking a selfie, the red glow of the TEDx sign making her look good. I practiced the entire speech for them, for the ghosts, for the people who were not and would never be there. I delivered my truth to a panel of empty velvet seats, and when I finished, my voice echoing in the vast, empty dark, I turned my back on them and walked off the stage. That rehearsal was the real talk. The actual event, the one that got millions of views, was just the performance. The first counterattack came, as I expected, from Caroline. My silence, my locked comments had infuriated her. She could not reach me, so she went public. She had moved past Instagram stories, a gossip blog, one that specialized in Chicago influencer drama, ran a full-page interview. The headline, "Family First. Caroline Beaumont speaks out on painful exploitation." I read it at my desk, the smell of sawdust and coffee in my studio. "My sister has always been dramatic," the article quoted her. "She has a vivid imagination. She embroiders things. Our family is and has always been incredibly supportive of her, for her to use a difficult personal disagreement to build her brand. It is deeply painful. Our family is being smeared, and it is heartbreaking. She was good. She had used my father's money well. She had learned the language of public relations. She was not the aggressor. She was the victim. The blowback was immediate. The internet, which had canonized me a week before, now cleaved neatly in two. There were the defenders, and there were the accusers. See, I knew something was off. This Eliza Beaumont girl built a career on a lie. Caroline seemed so genuine. This is tragic. The battle raged, not on my feeds, but on Twitter, on Reddit, on the comment sections of the blogs, and then the fallout. A sustainable lifestyle brand that had just signed Caroline to a six-figure deal announced they were pausing the partnership to review the situation. She had drawn blood, but in doing so, she had also shot herself. I remained silent. I kept building. Then the second attack. This one was not public. It was colder. It was an email sent to the official Beaumont Atelier inbox from Harrison Beaumont. Subject: Your recent visibility. I stared at my father's name. He had never emailed my company. The email was short. It was a corporate directive disguised as paternal concern. "Eliza, your mother and I have seen the articles. We understand you are trying to make a name for yourself, but this public airing of family grievances is beneath you, and it is damaging to people who still care about you. I understand your sister's nature. She is reactive, but she is your sister. I expect you to be the more mature one. I expect you to concede this fight and make a quiet public statement clarifying that this has all been a misunderstanding. Our company's reputation, and by extension your own, depends on a unified family image. Do not make this harder than it needs to be." I read the lines. Our company's reputation, not our family, not our hearts. He was not my father. He was a risk management executive at Palmetto Crest Holdings, and I was a liability. I printed the email. I pinned it to the investigation board on my studio wall. It hung there next to the threatening letter. The phone rang. It was Priya, my lawyer. "Eliza," she said, and her voice was energized. "It is time. I have it all. The final bank reports, the LLC incorporation papers filed by your father, naming Caroline as sole proprietor, funded entirely by the trust. We have a clear, undeniable breach of fiduciary duty. It is a slam dunk. I can file the civil suit by noon." The bomb was live. The detonator was in my hand. I looked at the board, my father's email, Caroline's interview, the threatening letter. "No," I said. There was a silence on the other end of the line. "No, Eliza, this is it. This is the moment." "No," I said again, my voice cold and steady. "A lawsuit is a fight. It is ugly. It is a mess. It is their stage. They will drag me into a deposition. They will paint me as vindictive. They will use their money to drown me in delays. They will win even if they lose. I am not giving them that satisfaction." "So what do we do?" Priya asked. "You just let them keep it." "No," I said. "We wait. We are not going to sue them. We are going to inform them." "Inform them of what?" "Of their options," I said. "But not yet. Not until I'm standing on a stage they cannot buy, argue with, or tear down." I was looking at the small, intricate model I had built for the Lakeshore Crown pitch. "I have a different kind of bomb, Priya, and I am lighting the fuse myself. If this story is touching you, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this video. It really helps me grow and create more." I hung up and called my team, the two new designers and Mia. "We have a problem," I said. The Lakeshore Crown Board, rattled by the public feud, had called me. "Miss Beaumont," Arthur Middleton had said, his voice clipped, "we are not in the business of hiring social media personalities. We are in the business of building legacy properties. This drama is a concern. Your TEDx talk was about narrative. We need to know if the narrative is true. Your ethical materials roadmap. We need to see it. Prove it. I had been given an ultimatum. They do not just want the design, I told my team. They want the proof. They want our supply chain. They want our soul. So, we are going to give it to them. That evening, I did not take them to a conference room. I took them to a scrapyard. It was 6 p.m. The sun was setting over the industrial plains. This, I said, is our roadmap. I had Mia bring her camera. We did not take photos of blueprints. We filmed the golden hour. We filmed the way the setting sun hit a pile of rusted corrugated steel, turning it from trash into a sculpture of pure liquid gold. We filmed a close-up of a shattered piece of green glass, half buried in the dirt, looking like an emerald. We filmed my new designer, a young woman named Clara, running her hand over the rough, beautiful grain of a waterlogged railroad tie. Mia cut it into a 1-minute clip. No words, just the cello music from my TEDx talk. The video was titled, Our Ethical Materials Roadmap. Step 1. We see the light in everything. I sent it to the Lakeshore Crown Board at midnight. At 9 inches the morning, my phone rang. It was Middleton. Miss Beaumont, he said. There was a new sound in his voice. Ah, you have an extraordinary way of seeing. I got the preliminary contract 2 days later. The terms were precise. They were brutal. Beaumont Atelier was provisionally hired for the lobby and terrace redesign. The contract was contingent on 2 things. 1, the final implementation had to exactly match the digital and physical models I had presented. 2, the contract would be voided if I did not win a major industry validation within the next 6 months. The message was clear. The Midwest Spatial Awards. I had to win. If I met both conditions, the contract would be finalized, and as a special consideration, I would be given the exclusive preferential right to purchase and develop the raw attic space. I had the key, but I had not yet earned the right to turn the lock. There was one last piece, the attic space, the penthouse. Even if I won, I still had to buy it. It was still owned by someone. I found him. His name was Silas Croft. He was a 90-year-old sculptor who had bought the raw space in the 1,970 seconds and used it as his studio, but he had not been up there in a decade. He was living in a retirement home. I went to see him. I did not bring a contract. I brought a laptop. I sat with him in a small sunlit room, and I showed him the Rooms That Remember exhibit video. I showed him the golden hour on rust. He watched, his hands gnarled with arthritis, perfectly still. He looked at me. His eyes were milky blue but clear. When I was young, he said, his voice like dry leaves, I would go up there at dawn. The light was like God's own paintbrush. I was afraid a developer would buy it and turn it into a glass box for a man with no soul. He pointed a trembling finger at the laptop, at my work. You are not a developer, child. You are a resurrectionist. He patted my hand. You go win your awards. You go build your crazy cloud of glass. The space is already yours. It has just been waiting for you. I left his room with tears in my eyes. I walked out into the bright, cold Chicago wind. I took out my phone. I called Priya. The Midwest Spatial Awards are next Thursday, I said. I will be watching. Eliza, good luck. I do not need luck, I said. I need you to schedule a meeting. I want to book a conference room at your firm for Friday morning, the day after the awards. For who? For my family, I said. I am sending them an invitation. It is time for them to finally see my work. The night of the Midwest Spatial Awards was a performance in itself. The entire event was held in a restored symphony hall, and the stage was bathed in a light so white and intense it looked like a river. It poured over the edges of the stage and flooded the first few rows, making the air itself seem thick and charged. I was sitting at a table with Sylvia and my small team, Mia, and my 2 designers. I was wearing a simple structural black dress I had bought at a thrift store and re-sewn myself. My hands were perfectly unnervingly still in my lap. We were in the final biggest category, Best Experiential Space. I was up against the two firms that were also pitching for Lakeshore Crown. Their presentations were first. They were slick, multi-million-dollar affairs. They showed animations of gleaming futuristic lobbies, all glass and steel and imported Italian marble. They talked about disruptive luxury and seamless integration. Their budgets were staggering. Their designs were cold, perfect, and utterly soulless. The audience, a sea of black ties and architectural glasses, applauded politely. Then it was my turn. And from Beaumont Atelier, presenting Rooms That Remember, Eliza Beaumont. I walked from the darkness of the audience into the white river of light. I felt it hot and blinding on my face. I stood at the podium. There was no animation on the massive screen behind me, just a single high-resolution photograph, a close-up of the charred church pew from my exhibit. "We are told," I began, my voice clear and amplified, echoing in the vast silent hall, "that good design is about hiding the flaws. It is about seamlessness. It is about perfection. I am here to tell you that this is a lie." I clicked the remote. The screen changed. A photo of the chandelier I had made from broken river-bottom glass. We are a culture obsessed with newness. We throw away our stories. We discard our histories. We sand away the patina. We paint over the memory. We shatter things and leave them for the next generation to clean up. We build shiny, empty rooms and call it luxury. My work, I said, is not about newness. It is about resurrection. I clicked again. The screen showed the model for the Lakeshore Crown lobby, my cloud of light. "This," I said, my voice gaining strength, "is a constellation of 1,000 pieces of broken reclaimed glass, each piece collected from demolition sites, from scrapyards, from the curbs of our city. Each piece was once sharp and dangerous and forgotten." I moved out from behind the podium, walking into the center of the light, feeling the eyes of the judges, the eyes of Arthur Middleton from Lakeshore Crown, who I knew was in the third row. We did not just glue them back together. We did not hide the breaks. We honored them. We have suspended each one, giving each individual shattered piece its own place, its own light. Together they form a new sky. Together they catch the light from the lake, and they do not just reflect it. They transform it. They create a space that tells you without a single word that everything broken can be gathered, that everything discarded has value, that every story deserves to be held in the light. I looked out, my eyes scanning the dark. My design philosophy is simple. You do not build a beautiful house by pretending the world is not messy. You build it by taking the messy, broken, forgotten pieces and making them the goddamn stars. I clicked one last time. The screen went black, save for 2 words: Beaumont Atelier. "I am not here to sell you a seamless, perfect, empty room," I said, my voice dropping, but carrying through the silence. "I am here to offer you a space that remembers, a space that heals. I am here to offer you a house built on my side of the shore, a house that is not afraid of the truth." I did not mention my family. I did not mention Charleston. I did not have to. My work had said it all. The room was completely, utterly still. Then the host's voice boomed again. "Thank you, Miss Beaumont. We will now begin the live audience-wide vote for the grand prize, which will be factored with the judges' scores. Please, everyone, take out your phones." A murmur rippled through the hall. People looked down. Phones, which had been respectfully hidden, emerged, their small blue-white screens illuminating hundreds of faces in the dark. And then, a strange new energy entered the room. It started in the back, a few whispers, a phone being passed between 2 people at a table, a low, sharp gasp. I, standing on the stage, waiting to be dismissed, saw it happen. It was a ripple. People were not just voting. They were searching. They were clicking. The buzz of my name, the TEDx talk, my exhibit. It had all created a perfect critical mass of online attention. Mia at my table was suddenly pale, her own phone in her hand. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with a kind of terrified awe. A gossip blogger, one who had been following the Caroline drama, had been live tweeting the awards, seeing my name, seeing me on stage for the final public vote. She had decided in that exact moment to drop her bomb. The tweet read, "As Eliza Beaumont goes for the big win, let's remember the family tragedy she's selling. Here's her sister, lifestyle guru Caroline Beaumont. A few years ago. You tell me who's dramatic." Attached was a video clip. It was old. It was grainy. From an Instagram story, long since deleted, but saved by someone. It was Caroline at what looked like a college party. She was laughing, holding up a birthday cake that clearly had someone else's name on it. "It's not even my birthday." Ha. She was slurring, laughing to the camera. "But I mean, when the spotlight is there, you just take it, right? Who cares? Anyone can borrow a birthday." The tweet was being shared. The link was flying around the room. The whispering in the auditorium was not the sound of gossip. It was not a prurient, excited buzz. It was the sound of 1,000 people collectively understanding. It was the sound of 1,000 puzzle pieces snapping into place. It was the sound of self-reflection. They had just heard my speech about honoring the broken pieces and a house not afraid of the truth. And now in their hands they held the shard of glass that proved I was not speaking in metaphor. The room grew intensely, profoundly silent. The host, unaware, cleared his throat. "Please cast your final votes." All eyes were on me, the judges, my competitors, Arthur Middleton. They were all staring, not with pity, not with accusation, with understanding. I did not look at my phone. I did not look at Mia. I did not look at the screen. I looked at the judge's table, at the white river of light at my feet. And then I simply bowed my head, a slow, graceful gesture. "Thank you," I said, my voice clear, and I walked off the stage. The 10 minutes that followed were the longest of my life. I was back at my table. Sylvia put her hand briefly on my forearm. It was the first time she had ever voluntarily touched me. The lights came up. "And now," the host said, holding the envelope, "the winner of the Midwest Spatial Award for Best Experiential Space and the recipient of the Lakeshore Crown Implementation Contract." My heart was not pounding. It was perfectly still. Beaumont Atelier. The world dissolved into white noise and applause. It was not polite applause. It was a standing ovation. It was a roar. Mia was screaming. She had her arms around my neck. Clara and my other designer were crying. Sylvia just looked at me. "Go," she said. "They are waiting." I walked back into the light. It did not feel hot this time. It felt warm. It felt like a sunrise. I held the heavy glass award in my hands. I looked out at the sea of people all on their feet. I did not cry. I just said, "Thank you. Now the real work begins." The rest of the night was a blur. Arthur Middleton shook my hand, his grip firm. "We knew you were the one, Miss Beaumont," he said. "But that was a confirmation. Our lawyers will have the final contracts for you in the morning." I signed them at 9 a.m. The next day, the contract for the largest project of my life, and the deed, the preferential right to purchase, the keys to the raw, leaking beautiful attic. Priya had an independent appraiser look at the architectural plans I had submitted, the ones for my future home, the ones that transformed the raw space into a glass and steel structure that opened to the sky. The estimated post-renovation value, he confirmed, would be just over $10 million, a $10 million life. I had the keys. I had the fortress. I was bulletproof. When I got back to my studio, exhausted, my head pounding, my glass award heavy in my bag, there was an email. The subject line was blank. The sender was Caroline Beaumont. I opened it. It was not an apology. It was not an excuse. It was one sentence. I didn't know not being seen hurt that much. I sat at my desk, the one I had made from a fire door. I read the line, the final quiet admission of my entire life's thesis. She was for the first time in the shadows. She was for the first time experiencing the cold, hollow ache of erasure. The world was for the first time not looking at her. And then I cried. I did not go to the storage closet. I just sat at my desk in my studio in my new life, and I wept. But the tears were different. I had cried in the storage closet at Sylvia's, and those tears were hot and sharp. The pain of a bone re-breaking to set right. These were cool. They were quiet. They did not burn. I tasted one on my lip, It was not even salty. It was just release. It was the long, slow exhale I had been holding in for my entire life. That night, I did not sleep. Mia and I took a crowbar and a bottle of cheap champagne up to the roof. We pried open the boarded-up access door to the raw attic space. The air was cold, smelling of rain and pigeon droppings. The wind howled through the broken, boarded-up windows. It was a wreck, a glorious, beautiful wreck. We walked through the vast, dark space, our footsteps echoing on the plywood subfloor. We reached the far wall, the one that would one day be all glass. We looked out. The city of Chicago was a sea of lights at our feet. The lake, Lake Michigan, was a vast black breathing thing in the darkness. The wind did not just howl, it sang. It whipped around us, and it sounded in the dark like the crisp, clean sound of a new ream of paper being opened, a blank page. Mia raised the bottle. "To the queen of the castle," she said. "It is not a castle," I said, looking out at the city. I thought of the river bottle chandelier, the charred pew, the constellation of broken glass, the light I had been chasing. "It is a lighthouse," I said. "It is the second light penthouse." We drank from the bottle. The champagne was terrible, and it was the best thing I had ever tasted. I went to see Sylvia the next day. I found her in the workshop, which was rare. "You won," she said. It was not a question. "I won," I confirmed. She nodded. "Good. Now it will be harder." She reached into her pocket. She was not holding a contract or a check. She was holding a small, single piece of glass. It was sea glass, a deep cobalt blue, worn smooth by decades in the water. "I found this on the shore at Montrose when I first came to this city," she said. "I have had it for 30 years. It was my first reclaimed material, my first reminder." She pressed it into my palm. It was cool and smooth. "You are building your cloud of glass," she said. "I think you are missing one piece." She closed my fingers over it. "This is your final piece, Eliza. Do not come back." It was not a firing. It was a graduation. I held the glass. "Thank you, Sylvia." "Do not thank me," she said, turning back to her work. "You did the work. Now go build your house in the sky." The 6 months of construction were not a renovation. They were an excavation. I was not building a penthouse. I was unearthing a sky. The raw leaking attic was a tomb, and my work was to resurrect it. My team, now grown to 6, moved in. And we did not just manage contractors. We were the contractors. We were the builders. We pulled up the rotted plywood subfloor and found the original massive steel beams that held the building up. They were pitted and dark, but structurally perfect. Instead of hiding them behind drywall, I had them sandblasted, exposing the raw, industrial, uncut steel, and then we sealed them, leaving them to crisscross the ceiling, a testament to the building's honest, unadorned strength. We did not import wood. I sourced the flooring from a demolished 19th-century tannery in Wisconsin. We laid the reclaimed wide plank white oak ourselves, each board bearing the scars and stories of 100 years, the nail holes, the water stains, the dark swirling grain. We sanded them just enough to make them smooth, but not enough to erase their memory. To walk on them was to walk on history. We ripped out the tiny broken dormer windows. In their place, we cut massive skylights, angling them to catch the morning sun in the east and the setting sun in the west. We did not just invite the light in, we carved a river for it to flow through. The walls were the most important part. No paint. I had my team hand trowel every single wall with a fine white lime-based plaster. It was a soft, chalky, living finish. It was not a sterile, perfect white. It was a white that changed with the day. It was blue in the morning, golden in the afternoon, and a soft lavender gray at twilight. The walls were a canvas, and the light was the paint. I had designed the interior with almost no right angles, the pathways, the hallways, the slow, gentle curve from the living area to the studio. They were not designed by me. They were designed by the sun. I had spent a week in the raw space, just tracing the path of the sunlight on the floor with chalk, marking its journey from dawn until dusk. My design simply followed that path. The entire penthouse was a slow, graceful inhalation. an orbit around the light. There were no sharp corners to interrupt the flow. There were no bragging angles, no look-at-me architectural tricks. The space was designed to make you exhale. In the very center of the penthouse, where the gabled roof was highest, there was no furniture. There was just life. I had spent 3 months in a pottery class. My hands, so used to steel and wood, now learning the language of clay, I had built by hand a massive, imperfect terracotta pot. It was a massive, imperfect terracotta pot the size of a small car. In it, we planted a 12-foot-tall olive tree. It was a living memory. It was my promise of peace, reaching its branches up to the skylight, its leaves a soft, silvery green against the raw, exposed steel. The main living room was a cathedral. The entire north-facing wall, the one I had first seen with Mia, was now gone. In its place, a single 20-foot-tall sheet of glass. It was not a window, it was a disappearance. It erased the boundary between inside and out, and floating in the center of the 2-story space was my constellation, my cloud of light. My team had spent a month assembling it. Thousands of pieces of broken, reclaimed, shattered glass, each one painstakingly suspended on a near-invisible filament. The blue sea glass Sylvia had given me was in the very center, a tiny dark blue heart. By day, it was a soft, abstract cloud, the light from the skylights refracting through it, casting 1,000 tiny watery rainbows on the white plaster walls. But at night, when the city lights came on, it was something else. It reflected the skyline, the endless twinkling lights of the city, and the dark, shimmering surface of the lake, until it looked like a cluster of fallen stars gathered and held safely right in my living room. My studio was not a separate room. It was not an office. It was a continuation. It was a vast open space at the west end of the penthouse, separated from the living area only by the olive tree. My desk did not face a wall. It faced the view, the city, the future. The desk itself was a single 20-foot-long beam of steel I had salvaged from a demolished train warehouse laid across 2 simple raw concrete blocks. It was a place to work, to create, to build. It was not a place to hide. I did not hide my history. I curated it. The main hallway, the one that curved with the sun's path, was a gallery. I had recreated my Rooms That Remember exhibit, but this time, it was permanent. It was my story. A QR code was etched into the oak of my dining table. When you scanned it, you heard the audio file. This was once a warehouse door. Now it is a place to gather. A code on the copper light fixture over the kitchen island. These were once discarded pipes. Now they are a chandelier. It was a house that was not afraid of the truth. It was a house built on the foundation of its own, acknowledged past. And then there was the balcony. It was deep, cut into the roofline, facing east. It was sheltered from the wind, and on it I had placed a single object, a simple, elegant, minimalist armchair. I had sketched it in my book 100 times. I went out there that first morning before the sun came up. I sat in the chair. I held a hot cup of coffee, my hands wrapped around the warm ceramic. And I watched the black of the lake turn to gray, then to a deep royal blue. I watched the first tentative sliver of orange crack the horizon. I watched the light pour over the edge of the world and hit my face. The sketch I had drawn on a vibrating, fogged-up bus window, my finger tracing a promise in the condensation, was now my reality. I was sitting in the room I had drawn. I was facing the sunrise. Priya insisted on the final formal appraisal. "Not for the bank," she said, "but for the file, for the authentication." The appraiser, a man in a crisp suit who had clearly valued hundreds of sterile beige high-rises, walked through the space. He did not speak. He just touched things. He ran his hand over the white plaster. He looked up at the steel beams. He stood in front of the glass cloud for a full 5 minutes. He left, still quiet. The report arrived 2 days later. The final post-completion independent valuation, $10 million. I pinned the report to my board in the studio. It was not a trophy. It was not a boast. It was a receipt. It was the documented, authenticated proof. It was the number that validated the work, the pain, the risk. It was the number that would in the final confrontation be my armor and my sword. I was home. But a home is not just a fortress. It is also a lighthouse, It must be seen. I decided to open it. I sent out invitations, not for a party, but for an exhibit, a 2-night private installation titled Home on My Side of the River. The guest list was small. Sylvia, Silas Croft, the sculptor, who I arranged to have driven from his home, Arthur Middleton, and the Lakeshore Board, my team, the editors who had written about me, the clients who had believed in me. And then I sent 3 more, 3 simple cream-colored cards sent by registered mail to an address in Charleston. The invitations were for Harrison and mother's name, Beaumont, and for Caroline Beaumont. At the bottom of the card, I had written a single line: "The door is open. There are no expectations." I did not need them to come, but I needed them to know they were invited. I needed them to know that I was not afraid. The TEDx talk in the 6 months of construction had taken on a life of its own. It had passed 20 million views. The line, "You do not need an invitation to build your own table," had become a mantra. The day before the exhibit, I had a stonemason come to the penthouse at the very entrance, the threshold, the single wide plank of oak you first stepped on when you entered. I had him carve the words, not big, not loud, just a simple, elegant script cut into the wood, a permanent reminder right where your feet landed. You do not need an invitation. My legacy was not just the penthouse. It was not just the business. It was the permission. The night of the exhibit, as the first guests arrived, I made an announcement. I stood next to the olive tree and I announced the formation of the Room of One's Own Chicago Scholarship, funded entirely by the profits from the Alchemist Hotel project. It was a full ride. 4-year scholarship, not for the students with the best grades, but for the young person, the young artist, designer, or creator who had been overlooked, the one who had been told they were invisible, the one who had been designing in the margins. "This," I said, "is not a handout, it is a key. It is the second light I was given, and now it is my honor to pass it on." I looked around the room at the light, at the people, at the home I had built. The fight was over, the work was done. Now all that was left was to open the door and see who walked in. The night of the opening was clear and cold, the Chicago air so sharp it felt like polished glass. The penthouse was not crowded, but it was full. It was full of the people who mattered. The media was there, but they were kept to the edges, their cameras flashing, but their usual aggressive hum muted by the space itself. The cloud of light was doing its work, casting a soft, refracted, dreamlike glow over everyone. The editors, the investors, the hotel executives, Sylvia, Silas Croft in his wheelchair, all mingling, all speaking in hushed tones. They were not at a party, they were in a cathedral. My team and I stood by the olive tree watching. We were not hosts, we were observers. The space was the host. It was doing all the talking. And then I saw them. They did not make an entrance. They slipped in as if from a side door, though there was none. My parents, my father looked smaller. In his impeccably tailored suit, standing in a room built of steel and resurrected wood, he looked thin, insubstantial. My mother was clutching his arm, her eyes wide, darting from the exposed beams to the skyline, her social armor completely useless against a design that was this honest. They were not the center of this room. They were not even a major feature. They were 2 small figures standing awkwardly by the wall on the wrong side of the river. They stood on the edge of the crowd, hesitant, out of place, watching a world they did not build and could not control. 10 minutes later, Caroline arrived. She came alone. She was not the glittering, spotlight-stealing girl from the garden party. She wore a simple dark dress. Her hair was pulled back. She had no makeup on. She looked pale and tired. And for the first time in her life, she looked her age. She did not look for my parents. She just stood. She stood near the entrance, her back to the wall, and she just watched. She watched the people. She watched the light. Priya Singh found me by the terrace door. She was as always smiling and she was carrying a simple manila envelope. "Eliza," she said, her voice warm, "this came by messenger this morning. I thought you might want it tonight." She handed it to me. It was heavy. "The meeting," I whispered. "The meeting," she confirmed, "was very productive." It seems your family and their partners had a sudden, profound desire to avoid litigation, especially in light of your recent visibility. They were cooperative. I opened the flap. I did not take it out all the way, just enough to see the contents. It was not a check. It was a bank confirmation, a wire transfer, the full amount of the original trust, plus interest, plus a significant additional sum for emotional and professional damages. And underneath it, there was a letter on heavy cream-colored cardstock, not from my father, not from Palmetto Crest. It was from the bank, from the trust managers. It was a formal, legal, bloodless acknowledgement of a procedural error in disbursement and a breach of fiduciary protocol. It was the admission. It was the white flag. It was the silent, terrified, corporate surrender. My fortress had held. They had looked up at the walls, and they had not even tried to climb. They had just laid their weapons at the gate. I looked at the paper, the number, the victory. I thought about walking to the small, discreet sound system. I thought about plugging in a microphone. I thought about stopping the music. I thought about reading the letter out loud, about holding up the bank confirmation, about showing the entire world the proof of their theft, the scale of my victory. I could have. I had earned the right. The old me, the girl in the garden, would have craved that moment of public vindication. But I was not her. I was the woman who had built this room. I slid the papers back into the envelope. I walked to the wall where I had hung the simple $2 photograph I had bought at the flea market. The black and white photo of the unknown woman smiling at the sea. At peace, I had framed it in a simple, reclaimed wood frame. I had called it the second light. I took the manila envelope, and I tucked it quietly behind the photograph. The proof was there. The truth was there. But it no longer needed a spotlight. It was just ballast. It was the old, heavy anchor that I was now leaving on the ocean floor, so my ship could finally fully sail. I turned, and my mother was standing there. Her face was a ruin of confused, conflicting emotions. "Eliza," she whispered. Her hand was fluttering at her throat. This house, it is..." She was searching for a word. It is a house," I said, my voice gentle. "We, your father and I, we are very proud." I looked at her, at this woman, who had told me to be polite, to not make a fuss. I looked for the lie. It was there, of course, but there was something else, too. A genuine, terrifying, profound confusion. She was proud. She was also terrified. She was in awe. She was irrelevant. She was all of it. I did not hug her. I did not perform the easy false reconciliation. I just nodded once. A simple, clean acknowledgement. "I am glad you came," I said, and I meant it. I left her standing there and walked toward the center of the room. Caroline was standing in front of the cloud of light. She was staring up at it, her head tilted, watching the way the city lights reflected in the thousands of broken pieces. She was watching the single cobalt blue heart Sylvia had given me. She did not turn when I walked up. She just spoke to the glass. "Did you really see me?" she asked. Her voice was so quiet, so raw, I could barely hear it. "Back then, did you even see me, or were you just looking at the spotlight?" I stood next to her. We were two sisters looking at a constellation of broken things. "I saw you, Caroline," I said, and the honesty of it surprised me. I saw all of it. I saw the girl who was terrified that if the light ever moved off her, even for a second, she would disappear. She flinched. She finally turned, her eyes for the first time meeting mine. They were red. "It hurts," she whispered. "What you said, about being invisible. I did not know it hurt like this." "I know," I said. A tear rolled down her cheek. Are you going to get revenge? Are you going to destroy us?" I looked at her. The girl who had worn my birthday. The girl who had cashed the check from my stolen future. The girl who had, in her own desperate, shallow way, been just as trapped as I was. And I felt nothing, not anger, not pity, just distance. "Caroline," I said, "I did not build this house to get revenge on you." I gestured to the room, to the light, to the sky. "I built it so I would never have to think about you again." "I did not build this house to get revenge on you," I said. I gestured to the room, to the light, to the sky. I did not build it to destroy you. I built it to survive you. And I have. I let the words hang. Then I said, I saw you enough not to get revenge. I left her by the cloud. I walked to the far side of the penthouse to a part of the studio that had been hidden by a simple white plaster screen. May I have your attention, please? The room quieted. My voice for the first time echoed in the space. I slid the screen away. Behind it was a small, perfect 8 feet by 8 feet cube. It was made entirely of translucent white glass. It was lit from within, a single, pure white light. It was a room of pure light. This, I said, is the room with the light on. This is the heart of the house. I opened the glass door. Inside, there was no furniture. There was no art. There was just a simple concrete pedestal. On top of the pedestal, framed under glass, was a single faded, creased piece of paper. It was a scanned, preserved image of the sketch I had made on the bus window, the drawing of the single chair facing the sunrise, and on the concrete base of the pedestal itself, carved just as it was at the entrance, were the words, "You do not need an invitation." I turned back to the room, to my parents standing in the shadows, to Caroline, weeping silently by the constellation, to Sylvia, who was smiling, a real actual smile, to Arthur Middleton and the investors and the media. In my old house, I said, my voice steady, the lights were used to celebrate one person and to erase another. This house is different. In this house, the light is for everyone. It is not a spotlight, it is a utility. It is here to show you that you are here, that you are seen, that you are solid. I gestured to the small bright room. I invite you, I said, to step in, to see for yourselves. There was no speech, there was no performance, just an open door. Silas Croft, the old sculptor, was the first one in, his wheelchair guided by his aide. He went into the white light and he just looked. Then Sylvia, then Mia, then slowly, everyone. My parents and Caroline stayed where they were. They all stepped into the cube of light, and in that pure white equalizing glow, there were no investors, there were no editors, there were no designers. There were just people, their faces, all of them reflected equally. The space was doing the work. It was saying the final true thing. Everyone who enters here is seen. When the room was quiet again, when the last person had stepped out, Arthur Middleton walked over to me. He was holding something in his hand. It was not a contract. It was not a trophy. It was a single, heavy, beautifully crafted key. A key of polished dark steel. "Miss Beaumont," he said, his voice thick. "The board of Lakeshore Crown asked me to give you this. This is the official key of ownership. The penthouse is formally, and with our deepest admiration, yours." He placed it in my hand. It was heavy. It was real. I closed my fingers around the cool metal. I stood there in the center of the home I had built. I looked past the cloud of light, past the olive tree, past the reflection of the people in the room. I looked out the massive single-pane window at the city that had been my sanctuary. The millions of lights. The endless, dark, promising lake. The knot. The one that had been tied in my stomach since I was a child. The one I had carried on the bus. The one I had felt tightened with every new betrayal. It was finally gone. It had not been untied with an explosion. It had not been cut with a knife. It had quite simply been dissolved.